And how are we all doing? Welcome back to the year of 2025. This is the first recorded episode, 2025, on Gears of Trust. I am your host, Maynard Bear. Thanks a lot for the strong blast off there in November, December 24. Having a lot of fun with the broadcast. Really am, folks. Once again, I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Like, follow, subscribe, please. It really does help the little guy. Like, follow, subscribe. That's all I ask. Today, my guest is going to be a gentleman named Rob Hilditch. And I know Rob from my past business life with Joey's Only Seafood out of Calgary. Rob looked after that franchising operation, and he basically was the business manager for that. That's my first encounter with Rob. And as I launched my podcast, now I'm starting to watch my traction I'm getting on social media feeds. And I found Rob's TikTok post for social chemistry on TikTok. And while it kind of set me back, it enlightened me to a lot of things I didn't even know about Rob. I've known Rob since, 2000 and wow, when was that? 2011?
I was going to say 8, but you would know better than I would, yeah.
Yeah, so it's 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I'd say 2010, I think, in around that range. So we've known each other for a while, and amazingly enough, as well as we knew each other, we didn't know each other as much as we thought we knew each other. That being said, I'm going to ask my buddy Rob here to bring you up to speed to let us know exactly what social chemistry is about. So what is social chemistry all about, Rob?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks, Maynard. Appreciate the opportunity to get our story out and tell the story about socialchemistry.ca. It was born from frustration, starting with me back in 2003 when I tried to commit suicide. Carbon monoxide poisoning sitting in my vehicle in my garage. I got very, very fortunate. And from that, I mean, technically speaking, there's no literal way I should be able to sit here and speak with you without like total just non-brain cognitivity. I got really, really lucky. But after trying to commit suicide, I was in and out of the hospital in less than 12 hours, which is funny because you can't even get into emergency these days in 12 hours. But back then, that's all I got. I was struggling really hard and couldn't find any support. At the time, I had just started working at Joey's, was making next to no money, so I couldn't afford any proper psychiatry or therapy. I could barely pay my rent at the time, and that pissed me off. And I, again, got very lucky in that situation and was able to get into some therapy that originally I thought was taken care of by the province.
Yeah.
It turned out that I had an angel in my life, and it turned out really well for me. So after a couple of years of going to therapy, I moved on, and I started to get better, and I found my own little processes and everything else that would help me with my depression. But it was still a fight. All the way through, still a fight. And then, so social chemistry had always been the name that I wanted to use, but it was always an idea. And then in October, I attend regularly this conference called The Gathering. And I just had an epiphany during the first session, literally the first session I went to on the Wednesday morning. And it was from another group called Day One Dads that's out of Airdrie, Alberta, that does a tremendous job in supporting men's health and now women's health as well. It's called Hey Dad, Hey Mom. And shout out to those guys because they do a tremendous job and they're growing it just immensely.
So what is the purpose of their group, like the Day One Dads?
Their group is doing the same thing. They're just trying to create awareness and get people to tell their stories.
So the whole focus is awareness of mental health,
awareness of mental health, getting it in front of as many people as we can, just getting people to start talking positively about this. So their piece that I had learned, they had what they call the care card, and I thought it was just an ingenious idea. And I was in a session with Woods Homes, which they partnered with, and they gave us all these care cards, and it was a QR code, just like I have on mine now. And so I'm not going to say I stole a lot of ideas from them, but I really loved what they were doing. But what I wanted to do and make it different was literally just talk about the suicide stories, tell their stories, have a place to actually tell people's stories so they can release it. So it was born out of the fact that, when we talk about it and when I talk about it with people, I like to think that I'm pretty highly emotionally intelligent. And so when I'm talking to people, I get an energy off of them, and I can figure out pretty quickly whether I can tell my story and whether it's a safe place to do it or not. But not a lot of people have that intuitiveness. And so during this gathering, I just decided to do it. So that night I went back, I got on my laptop, started building the website right away. Coming up with resources like Day One Dad does, but wanted to expand the resources, but also keep it pretty simple so that people who come to the site can find, emergency services, such as the 911 or, the suicide helplines and everything else that are out there. And I didn't want to make it just about dads and just about women. I wanted to make it for everybody. Anybody can come to our site. It's not just about men's mental health. We hear that narrative now, but I mean, let's talk about it wholly, that it affects all of society now, and especially after COVID. So it was, let's get into this. So we started it. And the ideology is that, you come to the site, you're able to release your story, even just getting it out on paper and telling people. You can do it anonymously, or you can give a name if you like. And then you get a chance to reflect on what you've said. And then on the site, you can find different resources to help pick you up so that you can kind of reconcile or reignite, your path and find your path to getting a little bit better. It's not going to be for everybody. There's people who are, heavily clinically depressed that, these resources aren't going to help. There's other places, but you can find those resources on our site. So it's just trying to help as many people as we possibly can. The tagline we use is that we're trying to build a community that's going to support each other one story at a time.
Wow. That's a pretty big mission, though, really. That's a pretty big mission. So through the process of building your own group, you've encountered these other 2 groups or 3 groups within Alberta right now?
Well, this is fun. This is the funny part, is that once I started, I've suffered from depression probably since I was about 14 or 15 years old. And, I'm in that algorithm. And I'm never really seeing this information out to me in Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. I've never been really seeing that. When I saw what these guys were doing, I got a chance to meet them at the gala. And I explained what I wanted to do. And, I'm like, it's very similar to what they're doing. And they encouraged me. They're like, no, do it. As many people we get out there talking about it is great. The funny thing is now that I'm doing it, I'm heavily into the algorithm, and I'm seeing a lot of great resources that are out there, to the point where I was almost like, should I still do this? Like, does this make sense? Am I wasting my time when there is a lot of great resources out there? And then it came back to what these 2 guys from Day One Dads told me, was that, hey, the more we get out there, the better it is. And what I'm finding is that the positivity that's surrounded my life now through that algorithm is tremendous. And it's changed. Just starting social chemistry alone is changing how I deal with stuff. Now, I'm not perfect. And I was recently called out for not being perfect. And how dare I do something like I'm doing when you can't control your own life? And my response to that was, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And it was somebody who I love dearly. And so I got to get a little verklempt when I talk about it, but they're not wrong. The difference in the way I look at it is that it helps me keep going. So it's a piece that helps my own mental health, and it gives me the ability to help maybe some other people's as well. So I'm like, fuck it, we're doing this. No. I don't care how many there is, and I don't care what's out there. My goal, and it's you call it your big hairy audacious goal. My big hairy audacious goal is to help 500,000 people in 500 days.
Wow.
I don't know what's going to happen. That's my goal.
That's pretty massive.
Yeah.
500,000 people in 500 days. Wow.
Well, and what I mean by that is that I'm hoping that within 500 days, I get 500 people to the site. And the more people we get to it, the more people are talking about it. And just, again, telling the story, whether people tell it or not, that's the basis of it. But the resources that are there, there's things that I've used for my own mental health to help me. So there's recommended podcasts that I recommend, that I've used, that I listen to, that I like. And I never used to be a podcast guy until like the last 8 months. And I found some great ones. And then, we talk about, self-help books. There's books out there that I've read, right? So these are all tools that I've used or I am using to help myself in my path, because it's always a continued path. You're always working on it. You're always growing. And then a big one for me, and the most feedback we've had actually, is our playlists. So I've always used on my Apple Music, I've always had one called my Pick Me Up playlist. And that's whenever I'm in a zone and I need to get out of my headspace, I put on that playlist, and like almost immediately I am changing my attitude. My anxiety's gone. I start thinking about more positive things. So music, for everybody has such a vital role in our lives. So I think that's one that people have really identified with, and it seems to be the one I'm getting the most feedback on. They particularly like my 80s and my Nickelback, apparently.
Nickelback.
They don't suck. They don't suck. Trust me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, good old Nickelback, eh?
Yeah, love them.
So you must see just a multitude of stories coming at you now.
Well, we haven't. On the site itself so far, we haven't had a tremendous amount come in. But like I said, the reason I wanted to start it, and this is the hardest part about starting at Maynard, is that, like I said, I have a pretty good I'm highly emotionally intelligent, if I want to say it that way, not to sound pompous. But I just have that, I don't know, that energy that I put out, that I'm able to get people to give me the same energy back.
Yeah.
And so, I had that. The stories we're getting are, great. And it's awesome. And I wish we were getting more engagement out of them between other people, but it's going to take time. But the stories I get from just talking to people, and again, where this inspiration comes from on doing it in the first place, is that talking to people, I have no problem telling my story. For years, I hid it. I can tell you right now, if anybody from our old workplace that we worked with together sees this, there's probably, out of 30 people in that office, 5 that know I tried to kill myself while I was working there.
Wow.
Because I hid it. And then as I was
it the wise thing to do, to hide it?
Honestly, I felt working there at the time that it was the wise thing to do. And then, as years went on and I started talking more about it, and quite honestly, there's probably more that know about it now. And more so now, because I started the website and most of them are on Facebook. But I think at the time, when you start telling people about your story, they feel safe because you've told them.
Yeah.
And then they feel that they can tell you theirs. And since I've started talking about this endeavor, or I'm calling a movement, is that people have really opened up, and I've heard some pretty tremendous stories. And the first night of the gathering, the night that I started doing this, we were at like the first inaugural party that they have, and I was introduced to a gentleman, and the guy says, "Hey, is this your first time here?" I'm like, "Nah, it's 5 or 6 or whatever it is." And he's like, "What was your biggest takeaway today?" And I pulled out the card and I showed it to him. And credit to Day One Dads again on their care card. And I just read a post for them today that I think they've given out more than 30,000 in the last 8 months. So wow. my other big hairy audacious goal is to beat them. So, and I don't even know if they know I exist yet, but I'm sure they'll have the same feelings about me, and that's a great positive attitude to have in competition, because there's nothing better than to be able to get this out to people. But this gentleman I met, I told him the story, and I go, "This is the coolest thing that's happened." He goes, "Well, why did it impact you so much?" And I told him my story. And then he told me his. And that story, I can see it. I can picture his face right now. It's not a story for me to tell. And I'm hoping one day he puts it on the site, but that truly was, I was like, awesome to meet you. I got to fucking go.
Yeah.
Like I got shit to do now. And then throughout the entire day, part of it, it's, their theme this year was vulnerability. And I sound like a commercial for Day One Dads and the Gathering Conference, but the founder of the Gathering, along with his partner Chris Nealand and Ryan Gill, Ryan started off the whole thing with vulnerability, and I think that was an awakening for me to a certain degree, because everybody was feeling vulnerable and was able to talk vulnerable and about their vulnerability, I should say, and we just had some great stories from people. And then I was just bragging. I'm like, hey, I want to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then people would tell me the stories. And I heard so many over those 3 days. And then, the Vendo Media story. I happened to meet one of the owners of Vendo Media at the Gathering, who was introduced through another friend. And we started chatting, and I was like, hey, for my company, Harding's Painting, I want to do some billboards. So let's talk. And he sent out a salesperson, and it was just before Remembrance Day. And the lady I dealt with, she's in my office, and we're chatting, and she goes, hey, by the way, what are you doing this weekend for the long weekend? And I said, I'm chasing my nephew plays in the BCHL, and so he was here playing a couple teams that weekend, so I was following him around Central Alberta. And then she says, well, what are you doing for Remembrance Day? And I go, well, I'm going to work on my passion project. And she asked me about her passion project, and I told her, why'd you want to start it? I told her my story. And she just gave me a hug. Right. And she had a story. Again, not my story to tell, but I just, I love talking to people, as you know. All I do is talk. You can tell from this podcast so far. And so the more I can tell it, and the more stories we get back, the ones we're hearing are incredible. Right. And the awesome part is that we're getting to hear these stories because these people survived. And that's the beauty in I guess, bringing awareness to mental health for everybody is the good part about it. The more people we can get talking about it, then the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, there's a lot of medicinal effect in talking about that, right? And getting it out in the open. That's an important part of the process.
Yeah, that's why we chose the word release, because you literally are releasing it. There's a lot of people, like that guy I met the first day at the conference. He'd never told anybody a story.
Yeah.
Right? Ever. And all of a sudden I'm the strange dude in a bar that he met, and all of a sudden he's telling me a story. So that to me was, my biggest concern on growing this is how do I accentuate that on a website where people can trust to do it. It'll take some time, but I know we'll get there.
So do you make one-on-one contact with everybody that visits your website, or what exactly?
Well, I think
it's just an anonymous process, or
it's an anonymous process. Again, you can choose. So when you go to our site, when you want to tell your story, you can fill out a form. You can put your city in. You can put a username in. It doesn't have to be your real name, but you don't have to do it at all. You can just tell your story. The only place that I engage is that before the story is posted, I review it just to make sure that this person, and this is the hard part, you just make sure this person isn't very unwell, or that there isn't anything in there that is something we wouldn't want to post for the public to read. And then I go ahead and post it. And then I generally will comment on it right away, and I thank them for their story and whatever it may be. So I don't directly deal with them. They'd have to come back to the site and see what we're commenting on. And because it's anonymous and we're not getting their email address, there's no way to notify them to let them know that it's been posted. So we use Instagram and Facebook and TikTok so that people can see the stories, which is where you found me on TikTok. So they're out there so that people can read them and give words of encouragement. And we just have to hope that the people who wrote the stories are following up and checking and seeing when their story is posted. So that was a piece for me. Sorry?
So you do take their stories and rewrite them and put them out there?
No, I don't rewrite them. I don't. All I do is read it, make sure that they're not talking about killing themselves now or something like that, or something horrific. So it's I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a professional. I'm
No.
just a guy on a website trying to help people. So I have to be very cognitive of not getting in the middle of what they're doing. But their words are their words. I don't touch them. All I do is copy and paste, drop it into a blog post for it to pop up on our site into our stories from the form that they've sent in. That's all I do. And I just want to make sure, again, they're okay. Now, end of day, if somebody was, I won't get into that, but you got to be careful, right? I can't be giving people advice. I'm not a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
All I do is encourage them and thank them.
So on your personal journey, Rob, touching base on psychological health and stuff like that, the medical system, and that any experience I've ever seen with medical system, and I'm 65, been in the workforce for half a decade here now, or half a century. Like I've had stepdaughters had mental issues from spousal abuse. The medical system in New Brunswick was garbage. My brother-in-law, he killed himself. Medical system in New Brunswick was garbage. I haven't had any episodes of the medical system here in Alberta in regards to mental health.
I can tell you it's fucking garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's consistently garbage from coast to coast then, eh?
This is funny. Like I get so mad when people talk about it. I was just recently, a month, 5-6 weeks ago, whatever it was, my stepfather was in a car accident, and I had to spend the time with him at the hospital where waiting for him to get checked out because the airbag crushed his chest so bad. And we were at the Foothills Hospital waiting for, someone to attend to him. And the police had brought, or I don't know who it was because it was around the corner. I couldn't see who actually brought this lady in, but this lady was in. You could hear her at the time. And then I got up because I was listening to the conversation. Obviously she's yelling. And I kind of moved over where I could see what was happening. And she's clearly in a lot of mental distress. And I don't know if she's under the influence or not. And we can talk about, the roots of, alcoholism and addiction. And that's all going to point back to mental health at one point, guaranteed. So I was upset. Like I was physically, like, I won't say physically upset, but, you could tell, from looking at my face. And just the way, and I understand to a certain degree, but just the way that the police officers and security dealt with this person was inhumane. I get they're loud. I get they're screaming. I did chuckle a little bit because the girl did say something at the one time that this is my Fifth Amendment right. And I'm like, you're in the wrong country.
Yeah, you're in the wrong country. Yeah.
But, in the state of mind that she's in, she's just wanting to get away. Right. And they brought her here to help her, but she just wants to get away. And then they just treated her like total dog crap. And that's, I think, inherently the problem that the medical system deals with, is that a lot of the people that they end up having to deal with mental incapacity or whatever you want to call it, a lot of them are just difficult to deal with. And when you're dealing with it a lot on a daily basis, those situations become tough to deal with. But I felt really bad for her because I've been there. I've literally been in her situation, a couple of times. So I get it. But the thing is that they give you a couple phone numbers, just, again, right after I started the site, I had a friend come to me and say, hey, would you talk to this person? And this particular one, because it's a friend, I said, yes, I'll talk to this person about my story. That's all I can do is tell them my story and my story of survival, and that there is possibility. But this particular person, they were put into one of the hospitals in the city. And I probably shouldn't have said Foothills earlier, but, they're put into a hospital in the city here, not the same one I was just talking about.
Yeah.
And he tried to kill himself, and he was in and out in 8 hours. He's given a phone number.
Amazing.
Right? Like, here's a phone number. Next time you feel like you want to kill yourself, call this number.
So something's happened in that person's life that's driven them to that type of decision, and you can resolve that with a phone number.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Back in 2003, when I tried to kill myself, I didn't get a phone number.
You didn't even get a phone number?
I didn't get a phone number. I didn't get anything. I was sent home with my mother, and there was no phone number. Right? They didn't give me anything back then. So I can say at least now they can give you 288 or sorry, 988 or 211, which are two great numbers to do for finding help. The Talk Suicide, 833-456-4566. You can text Talk Suicide as well, and you can find those resources on our site. So that there is a lot of great things that have happened in the last 15, 20 years that are out there to help people. What I want to do is just find a place where they can find a lot of that, and be able to find that help and, better help, things like that. Woods Homes here in Calgary does a great job with some free therapy that they do. So there is lots of places. Bridge the Gap. I've got one thing on the site where it's called the Canadian Benefits Finder. And you can find the benefits available to you to get help. So there is a lot more than there used to be, Maynard. But it's all third-party shit. It's not the stuff that, you should be getting at the hospital. And that's the thing. It's like, my daughter said to me, she goes, Dad, how come you don't go to the hospitals and give them this? Right. And I'm like, that's a great idea. I should just give these cards and hand them to them. The problem is that a lot of the people that the hospitals are dealing with are really down in the trenches. And our site can be used for that, but it's really for those people in the middle, if I'll call it that.
It's all starts somewhere, though, Rob. Right?
Agreed.
It all starts somewhere, right? You don't get into the trenches without starting.
Yeah,
right?
Can't disagree with that one at all.
Yeah. It's like the Canadian government, the Canadian health system absolutely fucking sucks. Like here we're talking mental health, and those guys are talking MAID, right? Medical assistance are dying, and that's a cool thing in Canada now. I think we've killed almost 100,000 Canadians with that system. As far as I'm concerned, personally,
I can't talk about that one.
No, you don't have to talk about that, but I'll speak to that. Is that from my perspective, the Canadian government is about as much concern about a Canadian citizen as that dog that was being treated in outpatients, right? You know what I mean? Like the Canadian government's really not about keeping us alive, about as much as extracting as much as they can out of us, be it monetarily or other ways. But that's Canada in a nutshell, I guess. So. I'm not a favor of the institution.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, that's a different episode altogether. But you just touched, I have a high value for life, and I'm just saying my government doesn't. Bottom line. Right, and that's reflective in the healthcare system, right? That's reflective in the healthcare system, right? They're not about healing people, not in Canada.
We're broken in that aspect, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Got the old guy all jacked up there now, Rob.
Crazy.
My. So I'm going to poke and prod a little bit here. So, are you comfortable in talking about your situation? Like, what place did you wind up being in?
Sorry?
Well, what place did you wind up in? Like, what caused you in 2003 to say, fuck it, that's it, I'm done?
Well, I don't know if there's... Well, I mean, there's...
Is there one determining factor, a multitude of determining factors?
I don't think there's ever one determining factor. I think there's a catalyst for sure that, for me, I can't speak to other people, but the catalyst for me was the dissolving of a relationship that was important to me. I was divorced already with a young child. She was 3 at the time. And my new relationship, we had a 1-year-old daughter at the time, and that relationship was dissolving. And I was already having a hard time navigating being a divorced dad with the first child, and with the second child, that was, killing me. And I won't say that not having the child was killing me, but it was like just all this stuff was going through your head. But let's call a spade a spade. My depression had been around for a very, very, very long time. This was just a catalyst to the overwhelming feeling that I was getting, that I was constantly sad. I was just constantly in bed. I didn't give a shit about anything or anyone at the time, obviously. This again was brought up to me a while ago that, because I chose to try and kill myself, it was me leaving behind my loved ones. And what I tried to explain to this particular person when they they brought it up to me was, you don't have a choice at that time. That there is no choice. It's funny if you'll remember your regional manager. I won't say his name.
Yeah.
But he has a mustache similar to yours.
Yeah.
And I used to argue with that guy tooth and nail about the fact that he thought people who committed suicide were chicken shits. And I'm like, dude, you don't get it. And so I think that was what I was trying to explain to this person, was that you can't understand what someone's like in that situation when they're that low and that down. I had a catalyst the night that it happened, but it's important to understand that wasn't the reason I tried to kill myself. Right? That was what people will call the final straw or whatever it was. But yeah. The difference is that I'd been considering killing myself for probably 4 or 5 months. Like heavily thought about
you had thought it over that much.
What's the best way to do it? How do I do it without, destroying my family when they find me? Things like that. Like I want to be able to look normal when they find me. Like I researched all this shit. And back then in the early days of the internet, it wasn't easy to find, but it was still there. And so I researched it. And so the day that I chose to do it, it wasn't because of what happened that day. Right, that was just the final straw.
Other factors moving up into it.
Yeah, so I got very lucky. I got home. I wasn't even home. I got home and I was in my house for quite a while, ruminating about what was going on in my life and everything else, and how my life sucked. And I'm making $32,000 a year, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on with my life? There's so many things that were a part of it. Life wasn't what I expected it to be. Blah blah blah. And again, that wasn't really what I felt about my life. The woman I was with at the time, I loved her more than anything. I left my first wife for her. We had another child. I love that child. I love all my daughters. I've got 3 now. And my youngest, I consider a blessing, because if I killed myself, she wouldn't be around. I consider all my children blessings. But you know what I mean, right? It's like,
yeah.
So there's so many things that are going through your mind when it happens. And I was just distraught. And I thought to myself, the only way I can fix this is by going. So I got up out of my room and I went out to the garage, detached garage. And it's one of those garages that was built in 1960 with newspaper. So it was heavily fortified and insulated. And I got my Volvo 740 and I turned it on, and I sat there. And I can't tell you how long I was there for. I remember my phone ringing when I was in it and not answering it. My old Audio Vox mobile phone. And I remember that, and that's it. So I have no idea, to be honest with you, what time I got in the car, or how long I was in there, or anything. And clearly it wasn't as insulated as I thought, because I think I was in there for quite some time. But it happened to be that the woman I was involved with at the time had called my father, my mother, and my stepfather, and they rushed over to the house because she thought something was up. And they rushed over to the house. They couldn't find me in the house. And then he saw the lights from my car through the garage window, and door was locked. So he kicked it in, opened the garage door. The car was in neutral, so he was able just to release the brake and push the car out into the alley. And then he pulled me from the vehicle. And I don't remember I kind of remember waking up, maybe. I don't remember, I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
And I do remember waking up in the ambulance as we arrived to the hospital. And again, I was there for a very short period of time.
8
I
hours later, you're out
during my path. Sorry?
8 hours later, you're out the door with a phone number.
Pretty much. It was probably closer to 12 hours, not even, but wow. I was in and out. And again, nothing, like absolutely nothing. I was left to my own devices to go to the Alberta healthcare system and try and find help. And, I did. I did find some rudimentary help. And it was from the oddest places. The very first person I got help from was a pastor in the Indigenous community, and had anything to do with my culture or anything else. Just happened to be that was this church that I could find that would talk to me, and that guy was great. I remember him vividly, and he was great. And at the time, that was when the Alberta Health Board was changing to the Super Board.
Yeah.
And it just happened to be that one of my best friends growing up, dad was on the Super Board. And so I had called him to ask for help. And, he says, "Oh, I'll see what I can do," and didn't hear anything, for weeks. And then all of a sudden I got a phone call from AHS, or what I thought was AHS, and said, "Hey, come talk to us." And so I did. And that was fortunate. I ended up getting into the system somehow, is what I believed. And the rest, as they say, is history. So I was able to get some help, which was great.
How much power is it? How much power is there, Rob, in the actual talking? To get to where you're at today, from where you were. If
we didn't have the talking, if we didn't let it out, if we didn't release it, then the power in the talking is there. The power in the talking is understanding. The power in the talking is, when you have somebody who is able to draw, and it doesn't have to be a professional, right? Yeah. Talking to your best friend, talking to anybody who is willing to listen. And I'll tell you one thing, if you have friends that you bring it up to and they're not willing to listen, fucking drop them. I've had to do that in my life. And that's fine. And I've got a great group of buddies. I'm very fortunate to have a lot of great friends, and a lot of great friends. Sorry.
That's okay. That's all good.
That have given a shit.
Yeah.
Right. And you got to find those. And if you don't have people in your life that are willing to support you through your mental health journey, then fucking lose them.
Yeah, lose them.
Find somebody else, because it's just not worth your torment to do it. And when I first started committing suicide, I had a really good friend that I grew up with that I just reconnected with, and he dropped me. And that's awesome, because I would have dropped him. Right. And it's awkward when I see him. Super awkward. Saw him at Costco a few months ago, and it was like awkward as fuck. But I have a great support group. My wife, who currently is the same lady I was with when I tried to kill myself. Yeah. And I credit a lot of me being alive today to the support she gave me. It's just, I've put her through hell, absolute hell. And she's supported me. Have we had our ups and downs over years? Yeah, we've split up a couple times and got back together and everything else. And she's my soulmate. She's my best friend. I love her to death. And you got to have people like that, right? Yeah. You got to have people like that. So I think the talking part of it, I've got a lot of great buddies that, just check in. I've got one friend in particular that, shout out Johnny, that always checks on me.
Wow.
That's like today, cool. I'm good today. I'm emotional now, but I'm pretty good today. And he just knows the story, and he's always checking. And I have lots of other friends that do too, but he's the one individual that's always just making sure I'm okay. How you doing, buddy? Yeah. And so, it's you have to have those people, and those are the people you have to talk to.
Yeah.
Right. And
well,
so the power of the spoken word is incredible.
You need those people in your life, regardless of your situation. I believe, Rob.
Oh yeah. Whether you're in whether you suffer,
whether you're an up cycle or a down cycle, it doesn't really matter. Those doesn't matter. People need to be in your life.
I always tell my kids, surround your and this is the age old adage that always surround yourself with people who you want to be like. Right, get rid of the duds. And so that's a mantra that I've lived with for quite some time. And so the people who are in my life that are close to me are ones that I truly care about. and that I want in my life, and that I will check in with. And I'm I'm horrible at checking in, to be honest with you. But the ones that check in with me, those are gold, man.
Yeah.
Gold.
Excellent, man. Pretty excellent.
Yeah.
I've never, personally, I've never experienced a down where I wanted to beat myself up, and I have experienced downs where I wanted to beat others. What's called, but I did.
Been there.
I've been there, done that, eh?
Yeah.
But yeah, those people that that reject you really quick, or like buddy that's saying it's all bullshit and stuff. That those people kind of tell you what they're about pretty quick, just by statements like that. But
Oh, totally.
yeah, we touched base before the broadcast here about suicide, and my personal experience with it is, like I say, if you earlier, is the question for me when it comes to suicide is why. And what propagates that question was as when I was a young fellow in 1974, and I was telling you, I'll tell you my story now. December 21st, 1974, my brother-in-law killed himself in front of the house back in New Brunswick, which is really, really weird. He was an army medic. He from Great Britain. He married my sister. They had 2 kids, all that stuff. About 4 or 5 months prior to that, he's working on a Chevy Biscayne station wagon. And he dropped the transmission on that. He was doing that, and he dropped the transmission on his head, knocked himself out, and then from there he started to act rather peculiar over a period of 6 months.
Yeah.
Fast forward into December.
Brain injury.
Yeah, that's what suspicion is, right? Fast forward into that, the night of the occurrence, he came to our house looking for a firearm, and my dad shut him down. They got in a big fight. My dad, avid hunter. Back then, you didn't lock anything up. Everything was on the rifle rack in the living room, right?
Yeah.
My dad sent him away. He went up the road, about 10 miles up the road to his father's place, and got a 22 long rifle, came back, rolled in front of the dooryard in a brand new 1974 Pontiac Astra, honked the horn. Everybody came to the windows. He put the long rifle in his mouth and squeezed the trigger. And then from there, his foot went to the floor, the engine revved up. My brother Larry ran out with a hammer, busted out the window, and shut the car off. So why? To this day, so that's 74. Wow. This was, yeah. Yeah, the real weird thing was the next day, my brother Mike and I were cleaning up the blood in the car, which is really weird, and I had to go to town to get a new window put in and stuff like that. But that one action that Merv took that night, it changed the destiny of an entire family. We're talking 10 kids in the family, six girls, 4 boys. And that one event shaped so many different philosophies towards mental health within one family. You'd never believe it. My brother Mike helped me through it and helped me realize that people were like animals. They were avid hunters in my family, from trapping rabbits as a kid and hunting deer and all that stuff. So he helped me deal with it in that context. But to this day, it's always kind of been at the back of my mind is why? What was so bad to motivate that person to do that? So I have a lot of empathy, and I've always had a lot of empathy with people that aren't as happy as I am. For those that have worked with me over the last 50 years, and the laughs I've shared with many a coworker and friends and stuff, I am what I am. That day there, one thing that was taught to me that I carry to this day is learn to accept as quickly as possible without reason. So there's so many things through my life of 65 years that I have seen that I've got no reason for why things have happened the way they happen. They just happen. And the sooner I found myself personally that I could accept that stuff, then I could move through it and have some level of self-preservation through it. That makes sense. But yeah, wow.
Wow. I can't even imagine having. Yeah, I couldn't even imagine having to, like, have you got help for that?
Rob, I've never spoke to this till today with you. Like, even with Debbie, I've never spoken in detail about that night. It's something I carry about, I think about, and when I see others in anguish of any type, the empathetic side comes out, because I know the severity of that anguish can create, and there's a very big ripple effect to the actions of one. So, like, take it back when into Horizon. When I worked at Horizon, we lost a team lead, got run over by a haul truck, and myself and another team lead from Shovels, we went down to Crow's Nest Pass for the funeral. And this guy was so well known within the Crow's Nest Pass that the funeral home couldn't handle a service for him, it was held in the high school gym, and there was over 1,100 people in the high school gym for this gentleman's service, and he was killed in an industrial accident, run over by a haul truck. And the emotional effect throughout that town is phenomenal, right? So it's I've got a lot of empathy with people in anguish, and I do what I can do to alleviate. But to this day, the why is always there for me, right? And that's why I had to ask you that question, Rob. Rob, what transpired in your world that propagated that type of decision, right? And to this day, whenever I see somebody on a high emotional plane, be it extremely high or extremely happy, I know something's going on there. I'm in tune to that stuff.
The same thing. You get the same thing as me. There's that emotional intelligence that allows you to pick up on people's energy and their vibe.
Yeah, that's what I saw. When I saw your TikTok, I said I got to reach out to Rob. But even when I saw your TikTok initially, your video, you had your hat on and your beard, I didn't remember you, because it's been like 8-9 years since we've dealt together.
Yeah,
I didn't even recognize it as you until I went to social chemistry. Holy fuck, that's Rob.
This is ugly, bug.
Yeah. No, it's not this ugly, but
he's as bald as me now.
Yeah, pretty much, eh?
Woo-hoo.
Pretty much, but I guess
it's when you reflect. And thank you for telling your story, because again, it's the act of being vulnerable that allows people to grow. I think when you talked about the spoken word and whether that helps, I truly believe it does, and I don't care who I tell it to, and if they don't want to hear it again, fuck them. And I don't do it. I don't know why I do it, to be honest with you. I just feel like sometimes it's the need to share. And my wife always says, stop oversharing. Most of the time she's right, Maynard. Most of the time she's right. But
if you don't vet that shit, it's like a pressure cooker, though, right?
Well, it is, and it's the funny thing is that in my life and in my path, I've had a lot of friends go down and have demons. I've the people I was talking about earlier, the friend that had the dad that was getting involved in the super board and shit like that. He ended up losing his youngest son, or second youngest son, I should say. And I remember they lost him to demons as far as drugs is concerned. And I remember calling my friend, and this is a friend that I lost touch with, to be honest with you. And I called him and I was like, I was in tears because I felt so, there wasn't I'm a total empath. There's no doubt about it. And I was so upset for him that it was hard. And then I had some friends that lost their son, and the son was a friend of mine, a tremendous young man, and in a car accident from a drunk driver a couple of years ago. And him and his girlfriend were killed instantly because of a jackass driving 197 kilometers an hour on Highway 21. And he launched him into an oncoming truck, and it happened on fucking Father's Day. And I still think about how hard it was, my friend Craig, to actually send us the text. And thank God his brother was there visiting, and it was up at our lake community, and he shared it with us, and I cried for days. Right. And it wasn't, and I know a lot of people did, but it's that just that empath quality, that emotional intelligence, if you want to call it that. It's understanding what people are going through And I think that's truly what drives me to want to do what I'm doing with socialchemistry.ca, is just try and help as many people as you can. Just release it, talk about it. We have conversations about it all the time, but it's understanding and feeling that energy and understanding. I think a lot of us work on the same energy, and a lot of us are able to pick it up. And, if all of us can get together and build that community one story at a time, then there can only be success from it.
I think a lot of people are more conscious to it than they believe. They just don't acknowledge it.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Now you got me crying. You got me swearing.
Yeah. It wasn't the intent, my friend.
No, it's all good. It's who I am. I'm unapologetically me. I've said that too many times in the last week. I don't end of day, and I know you're the same way. I don't care what people think about me.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's a proud conversation. It's an important conversation we're having today.
Agreed.
Absolutely, man. That's what struck me about social chemistry when I saw it, because it popped up in my For You feed. I wasn't looking for your site whatsoever, right? I was looking to see how my podcast was coming along and the exposure off the Opus clips and stuff, and it popped up in the For You page.
Nice.
Yeah, and I hadn't given any thought to this topic, but I knew when I saw your post and I saw your call, I knew whatever I could do to help, I would. I knew that from that moment, right? And that's the idea of bringing it to the podcast.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Here, it helped get the word out. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. And then, when you bring it, back twofold to, technically what your podcast is about, and in the workplace, it's important that we're talking about this for mental health advocacy, as far as, in the workplace itself, and having leaders within the workplace, letting people know that it's a safe place to share. Because, not as many people are as vocal as you and I would be.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who, are nervous about talking about it, but, won't even.
That's what
they're missing days of work, days and days and days of work where, the company they work for may already have the resources. And if they had the courage to be able to talk to their employer and say, this is what's going on, and the employer was open enough to say, hey, I understand things are happening in your life. Here's some resources that we have that might help so we can get you back to work safely.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an important topic as far as workplace is concerned, because, the amount of hours that employers lose to depression and anxiety and all these other things that they don't even know about with their
the employer doesn't have a clue, man.
No, I know. And that comes down to leadership and how you employ and how you run your business, and, telling your story. So again, and people, I don't have a lot of people in my employ because we're a franchise system, but, I try to build relationships with as many of our franchisors, our franchisees, and their people as I can, because their people are our people. They're the ones out there representing us. And, I give a shit. I want to make sure they're good. Right.
Yeah, but workers are unknowingly dealing with mental health issues every day. Every time you say this guy pisses me off, or that guy pisses me off, or the boss pisses me off, or I hate doing this, don't like doing that, or whatever, they're dealing with mental anguish of some level. They just don't realize it.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that. Wouldn't argue that at all.
I would. I've seen since I started the podcast, I've had a lot more conversations in the service trucks than we had before. So I become somewhat of a listening post. Is that a good way to say it?
I feel your pain.
Yeah, like I get a lot of people to regurgitate to me, in a service truck on shift and stuff like that. You get time in between shovels and stuff to have good heart conversations. That's what started this podcast, was the guys at Fort Hill saying, "Hey, these good conversations. You should create a podcast out of it." And here I am. But
I'm glad you did.
At the end of the day, I've seen guys do things out of anger that damage equipment, hurt themselves and stuff too, right? Like how many mechanics have ever swung a mechanic swinging the hammer out of anger and not aiming and hitting himself or hitting somebody else, and there's a lot of things. So we're just happen to be talking about the most dramatic part of the situation, but it's like with my brother-in-law Murr, I perceive it as a plane crash. A plane crash doesn't happen because of one event. It's a whole culmination of events that led up to that dramatic ending, right?
Yeah.
I think if any of the listeners are following here today, and if you ever had fucking days that you really had to think hard about things, young guys, I see that in the oil sands a lot with young guys losing families, and emotional devastation and havoc that wreaks on them. Wow, that's astronomical, and the mechanisms in place to deal with that for them really aren't adequate.
Yeah,
even aren't adequate. So,
that's exactly what we're trying to do with socialchemistry.ca is just give you a toolkit. There's lots of resources on there. It's just a small little toolkit that says, hey, maybe try this, maybe try that. It may not work for you, right? My daughter said this to me. He goes, it's not going to be for everybody, Dad. And she's right.
No, it won't be.
It's not going to be for everybody. I hope that it would be. But if you can find a resource and find something, maybe it's the Headway app. I use the Headway app all the time now. Every single morning on the way to work, I listen to a book summary and then listen to a couple tunes before I get to work. And on the way home, my playlist is on so that whatever shit happened at work, if there is any that did, that I get in the proper zone so that I can, you've heard the story about the guy that imaginarily hangs up his hat or whatever it was on the tree as he walks into the house. He's always putting his problems on the tree and then picks them up on his way out so he doesn't bring them to the house. I tried cognitively to do that. It's really hard sometimes. But that's, again, just one of the tools that you're using in your toolkit. There's just so many different ones. And I think once you get open to trying it and understanding it, it's hard for people who are really, really down there. They need much more things than, I'm able to provide off the website. But for the people who aren't that far down, or even the ones that are, there's the suicide helplines that are there. And then you can find other resources that might help you in your path.
Yeah. And those are non-governmental organizations, NGOs, those parties that you mentioned at the start of the program here.
Yeah.
Right. What's called. So those are on your website.
Yeah, we've got a few of those, like on the mental resource page itself. So we've got, under for the Canadian mental health support site under the Government of Canada's there. We've got the family violence resources that you can find from the Government of Canada. We've also got the Canadian Benefits Finder that I just realized has a broken link on it, so I got to fix that. So I'm going through them. There's resources like Bridge the Gap, and then every single province itself has its own resources as well. So BC, Alberta, those are all listed on the site too. And then Alberta itself, we've highlighted Counseling Alberta, which is another spot that you can find some great resources and some great help for minimal to no cost. There's Help Clinic Canada, Kids Help Phone. Again, because we're Calgary based, we got Woods Homes on there, and that's what we would call the non-urgent mental health resources. And then, find a book, find a self-help book, find a helpful app, find a podcast, whatever it may be that can help you lift you up. And then we've got the urgent care numbers there as well, like 988 for mental health, suicide and prevention, 211, which is 211.ca, which is another spot you can find help. And then we've got the talk suicide numbers there for both text and for calling.
Wow, that's good. So I'll put links to your website on the podcast as well too.
Appreciate that, sir.
No, more than just very little bit of effort to do that, my friend.
Yeah. As we used to say, as my brother played for the Penticton Knights back in the day from the BCJHL, I still have stickers on my skates that say a little extra effort makes the difference. Yeah,
absolutely does today.
Yeah.
A little bit makes a lot of difference, man.
Awesome.
Wow. That's quite an episode, eh?
Well, man, I appreciate it. Anything we can do to get the word out and get as much help to people as we can, I am all for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody watching this episode that knows me, you want to reach out to Rob and his organization. The links are on on the podcast, on my YouTube channel. We'll be on my Facebook as well, too. And then just reach out to me as always, guys. Reach out to me. A little plug for podcast Gears of Trust. Like, subscribe, please. It helps little guys out. And once again, Rob, man, I can't thank you ever so
No, I
much.
can't
for-
thank you
for
enough.
showing
I
up.
appreciate
It's
it.
just amazing story. And it's a big topic that needs to be brought to the forefront. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you helping us do that.
Yeah, my pleasure. That's didn't take any effort. Just have a good old fashioned conversation, man. And
Yeah.
it wasn't not scripted. It's just right out of the heart, folks. So
True story.
wow, true story. Okay, thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, say hi to Deb for me.
Yeah, most certainly will, Rob. Don't
All right,
go away,
man.
too.
You take
I'll
care.
close this off, but don't go away, please.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.